I've heard a lot of people complain about movie lengths. The movies nowadays are much longer. I hear that a lot when I'm hearing things about like The Brutalist. It's 3.5 hour long movie. Same thing with Killers of the Flower Moon. The new Mission Impossible movie is nearly 3 hours long. It's 2 hours, 50 minutes. Um, but then I was thinking like, is that actually true? Have movies actually gotten longer? Because this only comes up on the extreme end of things, the 3 hour long movies. And so I went to Letterbox, ev checked every year from 1900 to 2025, and realized I probably should have started at 1950 because 1900 everything was 1 minute long. So that was not useful for answering this question. Um, and then I picked the most popular 72 movies and I averaged out their lengths. And this is the movie lengths over time. So you can see at 1900, it's like 1 minute. I think it's 1.5 minutes exactly because there was a couple like 8 minute, 10 minute um, videos, movies. Um, Gradually going up, shooting up in 1914 and like around that area, just before the beginning of World War One, when feature-length films started showing up. Um, and no, it wasn't Birth of a Nation. Birth of a Nation is not the first feature-length film. I think there was actually one like 1908 or 1907 or something from Australia. But then Europe, 1913 started putting out a bunch of feature-length films. I think a lot of them were from Scandinavia, actually. There's a guy named Victor Sjöström. I haven't actually looked into where he's from. It sounds Scandinavian. Um, so then it continuously goes up and up. It gets longer, and then it kind of evens out a bit at about an average 110 minutes until the 80s. It drops down a little bit, which is consistent with what my mom and other people who lived through the 80s said is that, oh, there was a time where movies were pretty short, and that seems to be the 80s. Um, and in the 80s, there were a lot of like 90-minute comedies and stuff. There were still a few big epics. Um, but you can see that the last, like, with the exception of 2020, which is a blip year, um, it's been steadily increasing again since for about the mid 2000s. And our longest movie years, the only years that have ever gone over 2 hours are 2021, 2022, and 2023. I did not include 2024 in this graph. I accidentally included in a couple graphs because the information I was using was like October 2024 when I put this together, maybe in November. So like it doesn't include like Wicked or Gladiator 2 or some other big movies that came out at the end of the year. Um, but I did accidentally include 2024 in a few of these charts. Um, yeah, here I have it condensed to from 1950 to 2023, so we get a much cleaner look at what's going on here. And you can see, like, yeah, it was actually it was probably the 2010s where things started getting longer. Um, Possibly in response to the rise of streaming, where it felt like they had to big make it a big event to go out to the movies. The same thing happened in the 60s. You can see there's a huge jump right at the beginning of the 60s, and it's because they're fighting against television. And now they need to make bigger movies to convince people to come out to the theater. There's a drop in the 80s, so by the early 90s, it had recovered. Um, yeah. And then movies over 2.5 hours long. So there's a few of these early on. I think they're mostly actually serials that, but anyways, it was in the 50s where epics became popular, and they continued on into the 60s, and then in the 70s, those weren't necessarily like the big epics, but they were very ambitious auteur-driven films that had the long lengths. 80s looks, yeah, they dropped off hard. And then they're kind of making a comeback, especially in the last 3 years. Early 2010s, lots of 2.5 hour plus movies. Recently, there have been quite a few. Actually, 10 was the most ever recorded in the top 72 most popular films the year, and that was in 2023. And there had been 8 in 2021 or something around there. I can't read my graph that well. Um, but that's not that much higher than previous years. Like in 2012, it looks like it was like 8. In 2019, it was 6. Like we're talking like a handful of movies. I don't think these huge epics are the reason that movies are getting longer. Here are the amount of movies between 90 and 120 minutes. This is kind of what we think of as the average movie. Um, so move, yeah. So there's between like 35 and 50 for most of the last like 70 years. This is, yeah, this is maintained pretty stable since the late 70s. Um, this is the chart that is different. This is the movies under 90 minutes. They're basically gone. There was, I believe, 2 in 2024, and only 2. There wasn't a single one in 2023, the first time that had ever happened, when it used to be, well, it's not like it was since, say, the 50s when movies kind of like started getting to their length that, like, you can see here that, whether, yeah, 50s, they're sitting around 40 already, and like, in terms of the 90 to 120 minutes. But in the 50s here, there's 20-ish movies a year that are under 90 minutes, and now there are virtually none. You can see again that spike in the 80s. And so if it's not going to epics, that means it's going to between 2 and 2.5 hour films, going from 5 to 15 to 15 to 30 every year for these movies. And I think these are the ones that are actually making people feel like movies are getting longer, because the 90-minute movie is essentially dead. And the 2 to 2.5 hour movie um, is the new, it's kind of like the new hour 45 to 2 hour movie. And the like these 90 to 120-minute movies are kind of like the new 90-minute. And so people just feel like, oh, well, the movies are long, but they're taking the anger out on the huge epics, when I feel like the actual culprit of this is the just the movies are more like 20 to 30 minutes longer. Like if you see on average, I think if we go back to the beginning, yeah, here we go. They're actually only like 10 minutes longer on average. It's just that we don't have those short ones, and I think that's the bigger issue than having the big epics. I think that's everything I have for this. Let me know if you have any interesting insights into this as well.